Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Allen Rusk, and I am a fact writer. I'm part of a community that writes strategy guides on our own for various games across many platforms and genres. I've been doing this for well over 10 years now. And before I actually go forward into this, I also want to publicly thank Rooster Teeth for hosting this panel for me, and to Barbara in specific. She's been my contact for the whole panel thing here. And I also want to give a little bit of a shout out to people out on the web from the various websites that I am affiliated with, like GameFAQs, GamesX, Atari Age, Digital Press, Video Game Saga, Penny Arcade, and of course GTA Forums. Of course, my friends on Facebook and LinkedIn, as well as the Exotic Computer Club of San Antonio, and some friends over a little corner of the internet we like to call the MoFat. Anyway, to get started here, my involvement in this hobby began many years before I actually started in fact writing. I did technical writing in college, and then after moving to San Francisco in the late 80s, I did game testing work for Vodafone Software, and later on for Lucasfilm Games for about a few months, honing the technical writing skills I gained in college. I also did some game testing work for a small company out of Colorado called Point of View Computing. I also did some web programming work for them as well, enhancing some of my writing and designing skills. After having to move back here to San Antonio, just kind of languished around for a little bit. In 2002, we finally got internet connection to our house, and I discovered GameFAQs shortly thereafter. After reading through some of the facts for Grand Theft Auto Vice City, which was the game I was playing at that time, realized that it looked a lot like some of the stuff that I'd done previously, and it's like, I can do this. So armed with Power Mac and BB Edit Lite, I began writing my own Grand Theft Auto Vice City guide. That was released in April 2003, and later on I did its predecessor, Grand Theft Auto 3, and I moved forward ever since. The list on the screen here, as you see, is my complete work up to this point. It focuses primarily on two franchises, which is the Grand Theft Auto series and the Hitman series, both of which I'm a huge, huge fan of. Obviously looking forward to the new Hitman game coming out this December, and that's one of my future writing projects for the holidays. I've also done guides for Bully and the Chronicles of Riddick, The Darkness, Watchmen, Deadly Premonition, Mini Ninjas, and some other ones as well. But my primary focus for this panel is going to be on my latest work, which is for Godzilla, which is the import version. It came out in December of 2014. This is the cover for it right here. I would acquire it in March of about late February through Amazon. And the reason I chose this game as my writing project is because I am a huge G fan. I've been a G fan for almost 40 years now. My first G film was Godzilla vs. Megalon in 1977, and caught a few of the other ones on a late night movie show, and I've been a fan ever since. The Godzilla game looked pretty interesting based on the trailers, and I was hoping there was enough of a game for me to actually write on, which there was. And so, to get in the game, the first thing I decided to do was to look over the manuals. This is one of the first things I do, kind of a way to study the game and stuff like that. The problem here is that, well, when you're dealing with import games, you have to deal with that, the language barrier. And unfortunately, I cannot read that. And so for about a week, I was putzing around with translation programs, optical character recognition programs, and stuff like that. And I came to the conclusion that, well, just screw it. I'll just play the game and just figure things out as I go along. So I had to kind of abandon the manual there. And it's a pretty good manual, better than most games these days here, but unfortunately I couldn't read the language. Godzilla, basically, what you do here is that you play as Godzilla, obviously, and you land somewhere, and your goal is to destroy generators. And you have up to 10 stages here. Let me see if I can bring out the picture here. This is one of the pictures I got off the web here. And you start off here, and then after you complete this area, you move here. You can either go down these paths here. Your goal is to destroy the generators, and also you need to grow Godzilla. to be as big as possible because you'll be encountering other monsters as well, like Mechagodzilla and Hedorah and Mothra and a few others. And when you first play the game, you can only go as far as stage 7. It'll actually end at stage 7. And the reason for that is that in each stage, there are 4 little dots, and those are data collection points. And those data collection points need to be collected, and you're basically helping G-Force gather data on you. Once you get about 50 of them, then you can move on to stage 8 and stage 9, and where you will encounter the human-controlled Mechagodzillas from the later films, from the 90s and the Millennium series. And then if you grow your Godzilla to be 100 meters, then you can go to the final stage where you will encounter the new 2014 Godzilla, as well as become Burning Godzilla, which is, let me see where we got the picture here. This guy here. Because you had too much G energy, you kind of overload there, and you also get the game's true ending. And you'll also unlock that character plus 2014 version for King of the Monsters mode, which is basically a 6-stage rush game where you try to beat all the kaiju as quickly as possible to get the best score. There are trophies for getting it, for doing it once, for getting under 10 minutes, 6 minutes, and 8 minutes. The best time I've seen is 1:40, and my personal best is 2 minutes and 3 seconds on that. And so as I continued to figure out the structure of the game and which kaiju appeared where, I began to take notes. And most people just usually use paper stuff like this. I just mainly just open up pages in TextEdit or Text Wrangler, which is my preferred program here. Let me see if I bring up one of them here. There we go. What? No. I was fiddling around with this earlier. Let me see if I can bring up one of these here. And as I took notes, I wrote, I just wrote as much as I could. Whatever was in my head, I just drew out to quote unquote paper here. And then this is, just going over the objective, kind of like what I see in the menu here. Also, one of the things you can do in Godzilla is that when you can defeat a kaiju, you get a part or a cell from that kaiju, and you can use those parts to upgrade Godzilla through another mode called Evolution Mode, where you can get certain moves and certain other abilities, like being able to have different type of breaths, and different other moves that you can use, including some classic moves from the older Godzilla movies. And I just continue to write down stuff here. Also, you can do what is known as rush chains, which is basically a combo. You destroy a building, and there's like an energy meter on the side that you can't let go away. And you destroy another building, just add to it, and you can add multipliers, which will allow you to get more G energy and allow you to grow. My personal best is 120 some odd meters. And I've seen them grow as high as about 126 through the ranking system. Stuff like the time stages, because some of them are timed where you have a certain amount of time before they shut down. If they shut down on you, then you lose the stage and you have to do it again. Also, if you get defeated by a kaiju, your stage you have to do over again. And of course, going over data collection and all the other stuff, and my listing of the G-Forces, which is the military unit, which is often sent to deal with Godzilla and the other kaiju, and going over how, over all the various units that are involved in it. And they also bring out some of the higher end stuff, such as the Super X and the Super X2, and some of the other ones, using some of the various technology used in the later films. And I go over each of them, and I just drew out everything I could. I would later go back and just streamline and prune some of this stuff here. But the primary focus of this particular page was to just get everything out. Going over the films that they're in and stuff like that. And of course, I also go over the other kaiju that you'll be facing, along with the films they appear in, and my notes on them as well. And this is quite a lot here. And this is also one of my first attempts to put together the the stages and the areas that you go through, because some of the areas are harder or easier than others. This is also going over one of the trophies you can get to get one of the kaiju to appear called Jet Jaguar. He appeared in Godzilla vs. Megalon, and he's basically a robot that actually learned how to grow in order to fight the kaiju. And again, just going over some of the generators and the stages and the areas as much as possible, and what needs to be done in order to get the most out of them. Also, along with the stage branches and what enemies you may encounter. One of the things about it is that when you get to an area, you can encounter either one of these 3 enemies at one time, and also of a random size. Usually the kaiju are randomly sized to be around the same size as you are, if not a little bit smaller. Occasionally you'll get one that's 100 meters in size, sometimes much larger than you. If you manage to defeat a kaiju bigger than you like that, then you get 3 parts instead of 1. It's also much harder to do because if you're larger than the kaiju, then you can beat it more easily. You'll defeat its attacks more easily and won't do as much damage as you. But if the tables are turned, then you can get your butt kicked pretty hard. And this is where I just kind of learned how to put together the formatting for destruction mode. Let me see if I go over here, EV mode. And then later on, I had to go over an evolution mode, which is the upgrade area for Godzilla. Godzilla has a temperature gauge which allows him to use his breath powers or his energy blast powers. And you can upgrade those. There's like, when you start, you have just one little section. You can get up to 3, which allow you to use them more frequently. And of course, you can also speed up how quickly it recharges, along with the special moves. And again, this is just jotting down, scribbling, stuff like that. And also the translation of what's on the right side of the screen here. The main menus of the game are in English, but the sub-menus are in Japanese. And a gentleman over at GameFAQs actually managed to translate a lot of that. And I credit him for that work within the document here. And of course, you can get some of the moves and the different types of breaths you can use for Godzilla here. Spiral breath is the most powerful one, but it takes longest to recharge, and vapor breath is the weakest, but it's fastest to recharge. And how much of the gauge you upgrade and what breaths you use will also determine how fast your gauge will recharge. So the combination of the two can it affects the strategy within the certain areas. Let's see. Oh, and this was also another translation attempt. I would have liked to have been able to use the Japanese characters within the document, but the way GameFAQs does things could not allow me to do that. It would have been helpful to have the Japanese along with the English, so it'll be easier to navigate everything. 4 notes. One of the other resources that I used was some of the various forums that I frequent, and I just simply copied the information here along with the names of the people that contribute to information. So if I use this information, then I know who to credit when a document within and also at the end of the document. And again, it's just copying and pasting, no real major formatting, just getting the information that I can get. This is also some of the early translations of these are the trophies that you can earn in that game. And this is my attempt to format it into something a little bit more readable and separate them into different sections so I can copy and paste it into my document. And this was one of my earlier attempts at translation here. And this also included translations from other websites that I was able to try to get. This one came from Gamuru Island, I think that's how it's pronounced. And I just copied whatever I can get my hands on so I can study the game more in detail and learn more about it, so I can better learn how to play the game and better how to poke holes in it to see if I can find something better. And again, some more notes here. I'm trying to remember what I did here. Yeah, this is some of the stuff as I wrote down, as I found out stuff as I went from area to area. And let me see if I can bring up. So as I continued to put things together for Godzilla, I also wanted to find out what, when you write up enough guides, you can use bits and pieces of them as templates. And to demonstrate that, I brought up one of my other guides here, Deadly Premonition Red Seeds Profile, which is basically Twin Peaks, the video game, one of my favorites of the past 5 years. And basically what I do when I construct a guide, the first part here is where I just kind of introduce everything. And for Godzilla, I wanted to use it to go over the controls, some of the tech information for the PS3 version, G-Force, the Kaiju, and the trophies and stuff. For Red Seeds Profile, I go over stuff like the time and the combat and the side quests and stuff like that here. The second part is the main part of the guide, where I go beginning to end. For Godzilla, this included going over destruction mode, evolution mode, the King of the Monsters mode, and of course diorama mode, because there are trophies that needed to be earned as well. The guide isn't just how to beat the game, but also how to get all the trophies in it. So it serves as a trophy guide as well. This game has not been released on the Xbox side of things and probably will not be. So it's primarily PlayStation specific here. The third part here, and some of my guides have this, but not all of them do, is an extra section. For the extra section in Godzilla, I wanted to briefly go over the movies because I wanted to kind of serve as kind of like an introduction to the Godzilla movies, as well as some of the games that I actually own that feature Godzilla. For this one, I kind of go over side quest summary and Twin Peaks, which is the television show that the game basically rips off. And then the final part, of course, is the conclusion, where I go over basic copyright information, the bibliography, and some things, and just kind of end the document there. Let me see, bring up. It's Godzilla PS3 version. And this at the end is what it finally looks like. This is version 1 that was released in April. It took me roughly about a month to put everything together. And just has basic copyright information of the game itself that I always put at the beginning, as well as other boilerplate trademark information. And the table of contents going over the guide and the technical information, the story, the tutorial, kaiju and trophies. And of course, going over the destruction mode, the evolution, advanced moves, diorama mode, and the monster field guide. And then, of course, the film series, which is broken down by eras as well as the American films. Godzilla's been rebooted twice, and probably rebooted again, as they are working on another Godzilla movie out of Japan. Should be released sometime next year. And I just go over basic information of myself here. Just letting you know who I am, what I do, what I'm a part of, and a little bit about the guide itself. And this is something I've done ever since I started writing. And then going over the game and why I decided to use this game as a writing project. Mainly, again, as I mentioned, I'm a huge G fan. And a little bit of details about how I use Godzilla in the game. I primarily use Kaiju and the shorthand G because that's how I usually talk about when I talk about Godzilla. And some of the monsters that are in the Godzilla universe did not appear in the PlayStation 3 game. Most of these actually appear in the PlayStation 4 version. I'll actually go over some of the notes I've taken on that in a little bit here. There are some issues with the game, mainly slowdown. There's a pre-order bonus for the 2014 Godzilla version, but since it's so easy to unlock, it actually wasn't necessary. There's actually a custom soundtracks feature, which is actually kind of cool, where when you go to a certain stage or you go up against certain creatures, you can actually alter the soundtrack, have different music playing. But I found that when I put in any kind of music, the volume was so low that it was practically useless, which I was a bit disappointed in. And then I go over the story. Basically, Godzilla lands in 1954 and does some destruction. Actually, this sequence is actually the tutorial. And actually, you have to play through the tutorial just to get to the main menu the very first time you play through the game. but it explains the story behind it and G Energy, which is what's powering Japan during its rebuilding mode. And then, of course, the basic controls. I always include the controls in case people can't understand the manual or don't have one. And then I break down the main screen. And then, what's on the screen, what the gauges are or what the disaster level is. The disaster level is determined by how much you destroy and what difficulty mode you go through. There are like 3 different prime ministers, and they each have their own difficulty. So if you go the hard path, it becomes easier to up the destruction mode, the disaster level, which brings out more and more of the G-force, which makes it a little bit harder, but not too much in the PlayStation 3 version. And I go over the modes here, the menus, and another reason to go over the menus is because it also serves as a translation for those who get the Japanese version. So in straight order, going down, destruction mode, King of the Monsters mode, evolution mode, custom soundtracks, and all that. You can also adjust various volumes, and of course the camera. You can also control when or not to be connected online. You can't play against anybody else online in the PlayStation 3 version. This is primarily used for the ranking mode, where you can compare your scores of destruction mode and King of the Monsters mode with other people around the world. And that's where I compare my scores with others and see how others have done. As I mentioned, the best I've seen as far as Godzilla growth is concerned is about 126, and the best times have been at 40 for King of the Monsters mode. It also has an auto-save menu as well, an auto-save feature as well, so you don't have to worry about that. And then, of course, I go over the basic moves, primarily charging and grabbing your ranged weapons, which is the atomic breath, the famous atomic breath, and a nuclear pulse, which I call a nuclear pulse in this game, but it's actually called something else in the American version. And basically, when you activate it, you activate a field which pushes other kaiju away, but it really destroys buildings really, really great. And of course, the temperature gauge, which of course controls how often you can use your breath and pulse weapons. And then, of course, this is the cleaned up version of the G-force section, where I go over what they are, how they become more aggressive, and the different weapons that they, different divisions that they use, the forces, the aircraft, the cruisers, and the G-can. I call them G-cannons because they didn't have an English translation within the game, but they're actually called stationary guns in the American version. And one of my first revisions to this will be to change some of this to the more Americanized versions. And then, of course, I go over the higher end weapons, the Super X-Craft, and the human-controlled Mechagodzillas, along with listings of the films that they appear in for those who want to know where they are taken from. And then, of course, I go over the kaiju themselves. These are the monsters you have to face from time to time within the game. And, of course, this is where you get your parts for evolution mode so you can upgrade Godzilla. And the basic, there's a general strategy which works very well in the PlayStation 3 version, which is basically just charge at it, constantly ramming it over and over again. And if it tries to do anything, just use your nuclear pulse to disable its attack. Pretty simple to do. Really, in this game. It's still a fun game, though. And then, of course, like I do with the G-Force, I not only go over what they can do, but also what films they appear in as well. Most of them are involved here. Mothra and King Ghidorah, which is, of course, a favorite. The Smog Monster and Gigan and Jaguar, and the older, bad Mechagodzillas. And the newer ones, such as Biollante and Destroyer, and, of course, legendary. I call it Legendary Godzilla rather than 2014 Godzilla. I think the name fits more than that one here. And that's the new American Godzilla. And then here I go over the trophies to the game. And they're just split up between the various modes. For tutorial, destruction mode, King of the Monsters mode, and evolution mode, and diorama mode. In order to get stages for diorama mode, you actually have to destroy certain stages 100% completely. For figure collector, you actually have to destroy landmarks in destruction mode. There are 6 landmarks. They're all the famous landmarks like the Tokyo Tower and the Yokohama Ferris wheel. and you have to keep destroying the figure, in each run through, you have to keep destroying the landmarks, which is how you get all the figures. And then the monster field guy, and of course the last one, which is the platinum trophy. And then for the main part, I start going over to destruction mode. And one of the problems I had with this guide is, where do I put what information? In some of my other guides, like Deadly Premonition or Grand Theft Auto, this was relatively easy. But here it's like, do I put this information here or do I put this information there? Do I discuss this here or do I discuss this there? And this is the best I was able to do in order to get what I thought was the right information in the right place. For this one, I discuss the generators and how they contribute to how big you can make your Godzilla. And the rush change, which is often used to get even more G energy, which you can create chains when you destroy buildings, various G-force and stuff like that. And of course, the menu, starting new game and continuing. If you had to stop in the middle of a run, you continue pretty much where you left off. It auto saves that automatically. You can go also over the tutorial again in case you skipped out of that. There's also the invasion route, and has the, let me see if I bring that up again. No, I just went to like that here. Stage path. There's the three main paths here. There's the normal path, and there's the easy path, and then there's the hard path. And certain kaiju only appear in certain areas. This area is where you can only find Biolante. Area 1, Area 7, and Area 12 is you can find Jet Jaguar, and you actually have to do certain things to actually make him to appear. And there's a trophy for defeating him 3 times in one run through. And this is where you encounter Katengu, which is the craft used in Final Wars, Super Mechagodzilla, and Kiryu, which is the third Mechagodzilla from the Millennium series. And of course, this is where Godzilla 2014 is at. And I put that in text form here. And there's the time limits in the data collection, which I mentioned earlier. This is where I put those. And of course, the final stage, where you have to not only have all the data collection to move to stage 9, but also to be over 100 meters to actually get here. And then I break down the stage information. Because they didn't have English in this game, I actually decided to research the various areas on Wikipedia to find out where they took place in. Areas like Yokohama, and then Shiyoda, Tokyo. Tokyo is actually featured in multiple stages, but just saying Tokyo isn't going to work because Tokyo is such a huge area. So it's broken down in prefectures, which we would call suburbs here. And this is where some of the landmarks are at. Like, for example, in Yokohama, you'll find the Ferris wheel and the landmark tower, which are 2 of the landmarks you need to destroy to get figurines. There's a straight refinery. There's no area for that one. And the large Diet building, which is, of course, their Congress, their Capitol building, which is here. Mount Fuji, which is in the valley. There's the Tokyo Tower, which is in this area here. And Chiba, which is where another major landmark, which is the Makuhari Messe Convention Center, which is another landmark. So, just adding these little details, like what these places are named after and specifically where they're at, I thought would make a nice touch to the guide. And then, of course, the last one, which is Shinjuku, Tokyo, which is where Tokyo City Hall is at. And for this one, I also go, which is basically this in text form, which is where I actually picturize the actual stage breakdown information here. And of course, this is the cleaned up version of the breakdown of the stage and areas here, starting from stage 1, area 1, and just going down one by one, what you may need to do here in order to get the most out of each area, and which monsters may appear in that area here, whether it has a time limit, whether it's just generators or any landmarks here. And for this one here, you may encounter a 100-meter enemy, which makes it much harder because this is near the start of the game here. And what you may have to do in order to do that. And just going down each stage in each area, and also including the difficulty. And I separate them into like these little cards here just to kind of make it easier to see, easier to go through in case you scroll really fast. And again, just going over each and every area, little by little, going over how to get the Jet Jaguar trophy, and just keep going on here until we get to the end of the destruction mode, which is the final stage here, and how to beat how to beat Godzilla 2014. And when you transform into Burning Godzilla, you also get this really, really powerful breath move. And basically all you have to do to defeat Legendary Godzilla is just basically hang back and just hit him with a breath every so often. Just step back, hit him with a breath, step back, hit him with a breath. And he's pretty easy to defeat that way. And then after that, I go over the evolution mode. And going over the menus, being that it was in Japanese, how it's translated. And the parts you can earn is like the Mothra Lava and Adult Cells, King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla parts, and stuff like that, circuits. And you use these parts to get the upgrades. And I list what parts you need to get what part, to what upgrade here. There's trophies for getting all the upgrades. There's also trophies for getting certain upgrades. Two of the moves here are actually based off of the old Godzilla movies. There's like the Godzilla dance move, which was used in Monster Zero, and then there's like a breath move where you actually use as a jet to propel yourself backwards, and that was used in Godzilla vs. Ghidorah. You can actually use those moves in this game, and those are two of the upgrades you can earn here. And then I go over how the moves are used and what to do. Do you make those moves? How to do the 180-degree turn or the rear tail slam, and also discussing the trophies based on those on some of those moves here, and then of course the breath types, how to get those, and then the details on them, how they affect your temperature gauge and stuff like that. The next one here is the King of the Monsters mode, going over what it is about and how to make the best use of it. Basically, what the best thing to do is not even to touch it until you get Burning Godzilla, and then you have them completely upgraded, and then you just start playing and basically just ram them constantly and use your breath every so often. And you can, on your first try, you should get it under 4 minutes, and in 4 minutes time, you can get it up to 5 trophies, just like that, real easy. So that's what I recommend doing for that one here. And then of course diorama mode. And how to acquire, and of course acquiring all the stages for diorama mode, because what diorama mode is that basically it's a mode where you can set up stages and you have little figurines and you can actually take pictures, like if you had actual action figures and actual stages and where you can put the figures in, and then but you don't have everything when you start diorama mode. You actually have to earn everything. So to acquire the stages, you need to achieve 100% destruction in one area of each of the cities and regions. And of course, to acquire the characters and the figures, you have to destroy landmarks in destruction mode. And these are the landmarks you need to destroy. And you have to go through destruction mode many times to get those, to get all of them. And that would be the longest trophy to get. And then this is also the translation of the menu for diorama mode, what each one is and what the submenus are. I had to do a little bit of translation with a couple websites to get stuff like this one right here, because I couldn't figure out what that did based on just actually using it. One of the last things here is the Monster Field Guide. The Monster Field Guide is basically just going over, it's just basically like almost like trading cards, if you will. They just go over each of the kaiju that's ever appeared in the Godzilla films and what they are and stuff like that. And you earn those by defeating all the kaiju and acquiring the Godzilla Master Trophy. And there's a couple of trophies just for using this mode here. And then with the rest of the game done, now I go over to the extra section, which is what I call the Godzilla Legacy. And the first part of it is the film series, and I go over each film briefly. I did this because I wanted to at least give people who read the guide a little bit more idea of the Godzilla films if you're still relatively new to the franchise and and the monsters within them. And so for this one, I just go over them, starting with the first one here, which is, of course, the classic one, and just going over each ones in each series here. The first one is, of course, the Showa series, which is often the goofy, funny ones, which appeared in the 60s and 70s, but also introduced most of the monsters that are classics, like King Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan, and, of course, Mechagodzilla. And there were about 15 or 16 of them before they stopped in 1978. And for each one, I either go over a brief synopsis of the film or go over my personal experiences with the film. And then after the Showa series, I go over the Heisei series, which is the ones that took place in the 80s and 90s. Basically, they rebooted it, ignoring everything but the first film. So they had their own series where some of the monsters were retconned, like King Ghidorah. Its history was revised for this series here. It didn't have as many films in this series here. And that series ended in 1995 with Destroyer, where Godzilla was supposedly have died in it, but they found a way around it. And then, of course, the Millennium series, which was from 1999 to 2004. This one was different in that they didn't do a series so much as that each one was a standalone, which led itself with some very interesting stories to be told here. And the last film of that one was Final Wars. And then I also go over the American films, the much maligned 1998 version, and the newer, much more receptive 2014 version. And I just try to bring in enough detail from various areas to at least give an idea of what the films were about and why things happened the way they did here. And then the last section of this part is Godzilla and gaming. I do not have every Godzilla game that's ever been out. Godzilla's been in a lot of games since the early 80s. But these are the ones I actually own. From the movie Monster game, I also own Super Godzilla, which is also pretty nice for the Super Nintendo there. I actually have ROMs for an arcade version, an import version for the Saturn, and 2 for the Sega Dreamcast. The current game is actually based off of this one here, but this one is actually a piece of junk due to its horrible camera scheme. And of course, the 3 fighting games that came out several years ago for the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox. And they kind of played fast and loose with the monster moves and stuff like that there. And then with that completed, then I go over the conclusion, the basic notices, copyright notices, general boilerplate. I also list my stuff on a live journal page. And this is my bibliography. It's a little hard to get that word out there. Or I call it additional sources. These are all the sources that I used outside of my own head for what you saw here, where I get the information for translation, where the destruction mode, Godzilla movies, Gomorrah Island, Wikipedia, Wikizilla, and YouTube. I actually have a piece of film that I took from there to show you, but after a test run with the Hitman trailer that crashed, I thought, I don't want to screw that up. And then for credits, I basically thank the studios and for the various sites for hosting my web work. And finally, my contact information and the end to the guide here. And this is how I completed my Godzilla work for the PlayStation 3 version. As I mentioned, Godzilla is now out in the United States. On the PlayStation 3 side, it is only available in digital form. It did not sell enough to actually warrant a disc version. The only differences that I found so far are basically just the language. The gameplay, as far as I know, is exactly the same. The PlayStation 4 version, however, is way different. For example, one of the complaints about the PlayStation 3 version is that you could not play as any other monster in destruction mode. That's changed. You can now play as any monster in destruction mode. So that requires a completely different structure and form. Let me see if I can bring up some of the PlayStation 4 stuff here. These are some of the differences here. And in addition to that, when you play as a different monster, it's broken into two modes. Invasion, which is basically where you take like Biolante, one of the bad monsters, and you try to destroy everything, just like you would in the PlayStation 3 version with Godzilla. The good guy kaiju, which is the G-Force Mechagodzillas and Jet Jaguar, they get their own mode where you have to defeat a kaiju in order to protect the city. And then there's also evolution mode. You can also evolve these monsters as well. So they all have their own evolution menu. Acquiring diorama modes, diorama figures is actually purchased through diorama mode. You have an online mode where you can play against other people. It's just completely different. Also, many of the areas you play in have been expanded. They have more little cars and stuff you can destroy. It's just really a completely different game just about. And so these are some of the notes I've been taking on that. I'm not done with my note taking because I'm still haven't gotten through all the. There are two trophies I'm still trying to acquire. One for acquiring all the diorama figures, and one for completely upgrading every single kaiju, and that takes the longest to do. And so that's what I'm in the middle of. And as soon as I get all these notes together, then I will use my PlayStation 3 version of the guide. It has a template for the PlayStation 4 version. And even the trophies are different in this one. They're slightly different. There's trophies for playing in the versus mode. And of course, there's slight differences in the collectors. There's also one for getting the kaiju collector. Basically, in order to unlock a kaiju for destruction mode, you have to defeat it first in destruction mode, and then you get a part which you can unlock it in evolution mode, which will also allow you to finally play it in destruction mode. And again, these are all the notes, and these are all the monsters that actually appeared that didn't appear in the PlayStation 3 version. Odan and Anguirus, the first Mechagodzilla. There's actually 4 Mechagodzillas. The first Mechagodzilla in original Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Mechagodzilla 2 was in the PlayStation 3 version. That was actually using the sequel. And of course, the Batra, Space Godzilla. The 1964 version of Godzilla, which I think is an actual DLC, along with Mecha King Ghidorah. So you have more monsters, and they also tweaked the Vapor Breath, which is much weaker. And there's also some more strategy involved. In the PlayStation 3 version, you could just ram the monsters, ram them. You can't really do that this time. The monsters are more aggressive. They have more moves. You really can't do that. They have a feature called the Roar feature. And when you hit the L1 and R1 buttons together, you can actually make your kaiju roar. But it isn't just for show. During the roar animation, you're basically invincible. So it serves as a block function. And if you perform certain moves after a roar or during a roar, it'll actually become more powerful. For example, Hedorah has a single beam mode, an energy mode. And if you roar and then do that, it'll shoot out 3 beams, which can cause 3 times the damage. For Space Godzilla, if you roar and then hit triangle, you bring up these crystals, which while they are up, will allow you to have an unlimited temperature mode, allowing you to fire your breath multiple times while they're still up. So there's more strategy involved in the PlayStation 4 version than it was in the PlayStation 3 version. They did a lot of changes to that. And then going over the various stages here, like before. And I also go over the stages for each of the monsters here. As I've been playing along, I've been listing which monster appeared in each stage as I play through it for note taking, figuring out there's a certain pattern to monster appearance and stuff like that. And when you're destroying stuff, you actually get to face off against the Super X and Mechagodzilla crap like you would in the PlayStation 3 version. And also, you can also fight off against more than one kaiju, which is something I found out when you play off against when you're playing Godzilla and you go up against Super Mechagodzilla, you also face off against Rodan. This is actually inspired by the 1990s Mechagodzilla movie, where you also had to deal with Rodan. So you're actually doing some fights based off some of the movies as well. when you're playing against Rodan, when you're playing with playing as Anguirus, and you face up against Godzilla, he'll actually have his weak vapor breath, which I think is primarily inspired by his first appearance in the 50s. And each time I play through, I just take notes. Just take notes of all the monsters that appear when I encounter them. Again, to see if there's patterns and stuff like that. I've noticed that the lower tier monsters appear early on, and I just keep going here until I'm complete. Again, I'm not going to be finished taking notes until I get the 2 remaining trophies, and then I'll start working on the PlayStation 4 version. Hopefully, I'll have it out sometime in September. And then between September and December, I hope to at least get an update to my Grand Theft Auto 5 guide, being that I now have the PlayStation 4 version of it. And then, of course, in December is Hitman. And with that, I will conclude my spiel here and leave it open to questions and other subjects. If anybody has any questions or anything to say about my guides or anything else related to Godzilla or Grand Theft Auto or Hitman.
Do you ever use the official sources?
Well, for the Grand Theft Auto stuff, I actually get the books like this one here, but I primarily use it for mapping purposes. To find out where everything is at. I don't actually use it for the strategies, mainly because I rather figure it out on my own. But what I do, the thing about Grand Theft Auto is that it's a free-form game, and my spiel is doing certain things in a certain order. If you do certain things in a certain order, it'll become easier for you. And that's always been my angle with the Grand Theft Auto guides, regardless of what platform and which one. And that's always how I've been. And people, I get a lot of letters saying how they like how I structured things. With Godzilla and Hitman, it's of course different. They're not freeform. They're linear. With Hitman, I tried to find the best ways of doing the missions, usually trying to get all the collectible weapons in one go, as well as trying to do it without firing any shots. That's always fun to do, and I'm hoping that the new Hitman game will restore some of that, because Absolution kind of went away from all of that. And while it's fun in its own way, it's not, to me, a true Hitman game.
I noticed you've got a lot of current games. Do you ever think about going back and doing some of the older Godzilla games for Nintendo?
When I choose a game for writing, it's usually when I play through a game, it's how I feel when I play. If I'm writing something in my head as I'm playing and it's strong enough, then I'll usually do a guide on it, and that's how a lot of these came about. Chronicles of Riddick was like that. Stubbs the Zombie was like that, and then Bully was like that as well. Mainly, though, it's just basically the sequels to a lot of the games that I played. The Grand Theft Auto, Hitman. They do another Chronicles of Riddick game. I'll do that one. Same thing with The Darkness. I don't know if Deadly Premonition is going to go through with the sequel there. That may also depend on how popular the Twin Peaks revival becomes. For Deadly Premonition, I'm expecting that guy to actually get more hits over the course of the year, as more people are getting geared up for the new Twin Peaks episodes next year, because Deadly Premonition is basically the Twin Peaks video game. And actually, from what I understand, people have actually become Twin Peaks fans because of the game. So it's cross-referencing, it's cross-pollinating each other here. And that I'm excited about. So that one I'm keeping an eye on over the next year or so, as we get ready for the new Twin Peaks episodes, whether or not I get more contributions or there's new information that comes out for it.
You've got a lot of franchises. I see a few one-offs, like Mini Ninjas or Zombie.
Yeah, some of those are just like, if there's a need for it, then I can bang it out pretty quickly. That's what I did. For example, the Rumble Roses character story fact. It's a female wrestling game that came on the PlayStation 2. And I got the one for the Xbox 360, but it didn't include a story mode. It didn't include any information on the characters whatsoever. So if you got that game and didn't play the first one, it's like, who are these people? What are these characters? And so what I did is I took the game, slapped it in my PC, slapped it in my Mac, got the text files, and actually wrote out the story mode as best I could in text form. So if you get the XX version, then you go with the fact that you find out who these characters are, who their allegiances are. You know, like when you try to parodies, why these people, why they don't like each other? I think they're cool. Then you read, I see why they hate each other. I got it now. So it's a way to fill in some of that information.
You mentioned you'll get hits on game packs. Do they have a system?
Yeah, they have a system here where you can keep track of hits and stuff like that. My most popular guide based on hits alone from them is San Andreas, which isn't too surprising because that's usually a popular one of most GTA players, without question. I mean, I like GTA 4 and GTA 5 a lot, but GTA San Andreas is a long-term favorite. And if I have enough time between doing my PlayStation 5, GTA 5 update and Hitman, I hope to play around with the Xbox 360 version. I have that on my drive right now. And another thing I do with my guys is I play through as many of the platforms as possible. So what you see listed here is more or less what I've actually played through. I haven't played through the PC versions of most of the Grand Theft Auto games. Only the San Andreas one I played through the PC version. But I played through all 6 versions of Hitman 2. And I also had some guy write to me with all different ways of doing the missions in that game just recently. And that's the nice thing about the Hitman games. There's always something new to try. No matter how old they are, there's always something new to try. And that's what makes them so cool. They're really just puzzle games because you're in a room, you're in a mission, you have all these pieces, you have all these people, and you can do it just about any way you choose to. And Hitman 2 came out in 2002. And this guy just wrote me saying, here's some new ways of doing these missions. Like, wow. So, and I can't wait for the new Hitman game. Really, I can't. Although I will try to see the new movie just to see how badly they mangled the mythology again.
How often do you get feedback like that?
When I first got started, there was a lot of feedback because this was the primary information source for games and stuff like that. Once broadband came into being, everybody moved onto YouTube. But I don't see that as a minus. Each medium has its pluses and minuses. Text form has its own pluses and minuses, and so does film. For example, text form, there's no pictures. But usually, depending on the writer, you can get a lot of detailed information. One of my fellow writers who does Grand Theft Auto work as well, and has been kind of a friend of mine for a number of years, he focuses mainly on trivia within the Grand Theft Auto. And he just has a ton of stuff. So if you want trivia, you can check out his guide. And so each of us has our own way of doing things. So if you look through different the Grand Theft Auto guides from different authors, you get different views. And that's always a good thing. And then, of course, you can go over YouTube and see how they do it and stuff like that. And so it's just more information for everybody. And this is my area. This is what I'm most comfortable in.
Last question: how many hours of gameplay does it usually take to?
It just varies. It just varies. I don't play 24 hours a day. I do have a job in retail, so I can only do like 3 hours. On average, maybe like 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on how long it takes for me to surf the web and stuff like that, and use and my usual web surfing. Then I get to play the game for a while, and then go to bed and go to work. Usually on my days off, I can play a little bit more. But when with a job, it takes a while. I don't have the income to play games every day, so and it's nice to be able to go to work as well because it breaks up the monotony of things as well. It allows my mind to get away from the game for a while and just chews on it in the back of its head, and then I go back and I write something else up or I try something new. So, but yeah, it's about an average of 2.5 to 3 hours per night. That's it. All right. All right. Well, I want to thank my audience here and as well as everybody watching here. Hopefully, I'll do this again next year. I don't know what I'll be working on at that time. And that's it. You know how to end this thing here.